Resources and Energy. We're continuing to work on heat, S5, Affordable Heat Act, and today we have Matt Koda, Executive Director of Vermont Fuel Dealers, in to talk with us. We have a number of things we'd like to learn about to help us work on the bill. So, Mr. Koda, please welcome back to Natural Resources and Energy. First official visit of the year.
Thank you, and Senator McCormick, Senator McCollum. One, I probably shouldn't start testimony by correcting the chair, but I will anyways. I am not the executive director of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association.
Oh, we got to update our
I resigned that
contact
position
database.
in September of 2022. The executive director of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association is Stephanie Austin.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that correction. Maybe before you leave, you could talk to Sue. She can correct our contact list so we give you the right title.
Please don't blame Jude. It's my error. I should send that to her. So this is my 19th year walking these floors. 2 as a journalist, 16 as executive director of the Fuel Dealers Association, and the first as the owner of Meadow Hill, which is a trade association management and government affairs firm. I work for nonprofit trade associations, manage their organizations, and provide government affairs services. One of those clients is the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association, which is an organization of oil, heat, and propane suppliers. The other is the Heating and Cooling Contractors of Vermont, which is an organization of people that install heating systems and cooling systems. And that is how we provide training for fuel and non-fuel sellers that install boilers and furnaces and cold climate heat pumps and other things in homes. We provide that training throughout the state. Here at Montpelier, it's over on 1 Grave Street, but we also go to different supply warehouses all around the state and tech centers, delivering certification, licensing, and continuing education programs for the heating and cooling community. Mostly existing workforce. We leave the training of the teenagers to the tech centers where it should be. I also am managing director and head of government affairs under Meadow Hill for the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association, which is the nonprofit trade association of local auto sellers, not the manufacturers, but the ones that work here in Vermont. And then finally, the last nonprofit that I manage is called the Split the Ticket Fund, which is a program I started 15 years ago, which has organized the delivery of over 100,000 gallons of free heating fuel. But
Thank you. So you have we have some, just so that people know things we're going to cover. You have some general thoughts on S5, on some testimony we've already heard in here, and then as we've been working, we have some nuts and bolts questions that have come up around training, workforce development, and then the other thing I'd ask you to help us understand, the bill seeks to create an define obligated parties. It does define obligated parties as people delivering fuel, fossil fuel in and into the first delivery in and into Vermont. And we really want to make sure that we understand how fuel gets here and who brings it, so that we can more precisely envision who would become an obligated party and who would become.
yeah, so I want to make best use of my short time here. I'm happy to present slide decks, written testimony. You'd ask me if we had that, but I'm not going to do that because I want to use my best use of time and take your questions. As you know me, those of you know me, and of course I know Senator White from her experience in the House, and I know Senator Watson because she was so gracious enough, her and her team at Montpelier High School would invite me to talk about energy and the environment.
Well, we have about 50 minutes,
okay,
especially by getting a little early start.
Okay, so let me just start the conversation by saying this policy is something that I have personally been involved with for over 2 years now. Right. So when Richard Coward said Climate Council wants to discuss how we can get more fuel dealers to sell lower carbon fuels and to install equipment that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. We immediately said, yeah, let's have that conversation. So the policy, as it was created through Richard and Jared and the Climate Council, as it developed over time, as it was presented as the Clean Heat Standard in the House last year. I'm familiar with them. Right? And in generally speaking, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to meet the mandates of Global Warming Solutions Act, yes. We are trying to get the existing workforce to sell stuff, fuel and equipment that reduces the greenhouse gas emissions that their customers emit in the thermal sector. We're incentivizing them to reduce carbon from their existing fuel stream and incentivizing them to install equipment that reduces their core sales of that fossil fuel. We are not, and this is the bugaboo, because it's elegant in simplicity, but here's the complexity which keeps me up at night. We are not transferring money from a big oil company in Texas to Vermont homeowner on Main Street. That's not what's happening. What we are doing, as the bill is written, is we are having existing retailers and wholesalers pay for credits, the proceeds of which go to companies like Marks and others that are installing these devices, incentivizing these individual fuel companies to get more into that business than they already are. But we are not taxing an out-of-state big old oil company in order to fund a rebate or incentive for John Q homeowner in order to install a device. We are transferring funds from one local business to another local business in most cases. Not all, but in most.
Yeah, so, well, thanks for making that so clear. You know, we want to be very clear-eyed about what we're designing, what we're doing, where we're going, and why. So to what degree do you feel like the folks already in the heat business that you represent will change their, portfolio of work from less fuel to more new devices?
So every fuel seller in Vermont retailer is a little bit different. Ownership is different, employees are different, skill sets are different, products are different. Certainly there are fuel sellers that have been in the service business from day one, that have been selling more efficient equipment, what they do, that have reduced the amount of sulfur in the fuel, that have added biodiesel, that are selling wood pellets, that are selling chunk wood, that are installing cold climate heat pumps. We did a survey, and 3 out of every 4 fuel dealers in Vermont sells cold climate heat pumps. And
Sorry, can you say that again?
3 out of every 5, 60% of fuel dealers already sell cold climate heat pumps. And then we also asked, if you don't, for the 2/5, are you considering? And 1/5 said yes. So according to my survey, 4 out of every 5 is either already selling or will sell. And why do they do that? Because they're already in the homes, right? They not only are they in their homes, they got the keys in them. For many cases, they have the keys because you call them and say, hey, listen, I'm gonna leave the key here. If the alarm goes off and the pipes freeze, come out 2 in the morning and fix it. They have that relationship, which is why I think the folks at RAP and the Climate Council said, yeah, we need to do it with Matsky, but we can't do it against them. And we understood that. And we also are installing these devices, and we have different opinions than what you've heard from other advocates that have sat in this chair about what they can and can't do. I'm happy to explain that, but it'd be better explained by someone that actually does this work. So as I said to Senator White before then, I can't speak for every single fuel seller in the contractor. I can't. I can present the issues that I see with this bill that should be addressed, and I can encourage you to hear from voices that may not necessarily agree with this policy, but can provide insight into what's happening in the energy space with Vermont. Vermonters want to get their home.
Well, thanks for that offer. We've been, after you provide a testimony offline. I'd love to check in with you, sure, and help us develop a witness list so we can make sure we're hearing those voices.
So can I just reset everything and just sort of explain from our perspective the complexity of what you're trying to do? The simplicity is out of it. We want to inspire those members that sell high carbon fuels to reduce the amount of fuel, carbon in their fuel, the greenhouse gas emissions in their fuel, and to install devices that reduce their customers' greenhouse gas emissions. And those that refuse to do that, we're going to make them buy those credits, right? So this performance standard certainly isn't invented from Volkswagen, right? So the most successful version of this that I am aware of, my friends might disagree with this, but it is the California low carbon fuel standard, right? So that's on motor fuels. I know Senator White has a bill, but whether you're talking about motor fuels or heating fuels, California is a different situation, right? So what happens in California with motor fuels? And it's instructive to this legislation. In California, there are nearly a dozen refineries, all creating California-grade gasoline. Those are the obligated parties. The refiners, the ones that are taking the crude oil and creating gasoline, they're the ones that are, in fact, having to purchase credits, the credits of which are largely coming from what? Biodiesel. Biodiesel being produced in the United States is going to California because of the low carbon fuels. That is the success story of California. Moving more of their heavy trucks from standard diesel to renewable diesel. I encourage you, he's a friend of mine, Floyd Vergara, who designed the program for the California Air Resources Board. You can zoom him in anytime, and he'll explain how he designed that policy, what the point of obligation is there, and how successful it's been.
And what's the name again?
Floyd Vergara.
Floyd Vergara. Okay. So then we can get contact information. That's
So they can do that. They don't have it on heat because it's not an issue there. Because the point of obligation is as far upstream as you can get, other than taxing it when it's pumped out of the ground, or putting that point of obligation when it comes out of the ground, which we, by the way, we do. The federal government does. It's the oil spill liability tax, which comes whether it's imported or comes out of the ground. That's the 4 cents on a barrel. But in California, when it comes to low carbon fuel standard, it's at the point at the refiner. And because of the California standard for gasoline, which is complicated and a little bit more environmentally friendly than the rest of the gasoline, they're not getting truckloads of gasoline shipped from Nevada because there's no refinery there. They're not making the California fuel. It's if you buy a gallon, I used to live in California, you buy a gallon of gasoline in California, it's been refined in California. Not so here, right? So we don't have a pipeline. We haven't had a terminal since the early 80s when they shut down the Dolphin and throw it to the waterfront. We used to get barges from Albany. That stopped 4 years ago. So if we get fuel imported into Vermont, I can share this. It comes by train or by truck, right? So it comes from train from the switch in Albany. It comes from Canada, from the refinery of East Quebec. It also comes by truck. A third of our product, whether it's gasoline, heating oil, diesel fuel, propane, is coming by rail, either to a rail facility just outside of Vermont or directly into Vermont, or it's coming in, another 2/3 is coming in by a 9,000 gallon tank here, an 18-wheeler, driving a big old truck. That's coming from Quebec. It's coming from Albany, from over 12 wholesalers that have a spot in Albany. It's coming in Springfield, which there's about 6 wholesalers there, which that product is largely coming up the Buckeye Pipeline. It comes from New Jersey. It's going into Albany through the TEPCO pipeline or by barge from New York Harbor. If it's propane, it's going by pipeline from Mount Bellevue, Texas to Selkirk, New York, which is south of Albany. If it is, or it's coming by ship from Europe into Newington, New Hampshire. That's where the propane comes from. Or it's coming by rail car from Quebec. So if you're a fuel dealer in Northfield, if you're Karen Coro in Northfield, Vermont, your product is coming from Quebec, Albany, Springfield, Portsmouth. And from there, it's coming from all different places, okay? So I say all this to frame where is the point of obligation, because that's what we're after. If we were California, this would be a lot simpler from my perspective. We are not. So the point of obligation is when it crosses the border. Okay, so for every different fuel dealer, it's a different standard. It's not whether you're big or you're small, it's where's your supply coming from. And that is an accident of geography. So if you are Brian Gray with Energy Co-op of Vermont, you don't have a bulk plant. You're a small operation, which most are. According to UVM Center for Rural Studies, the average fuel dealer in Vermont is 12 employees and 2,000 customers. Time. But you are driving to the terminal, trackside terminal in Montpelier if you're Brian Gray. You're picking up 2,800 gallons in your straight truck, right? And then you're making your deliveries. Not obligated under the legislation as written. The obligated party in that case would be either the company that's bringing in the fuel from Quebec, which is the Valero Corporation, or it would be the company that owns the terminal, which is the Moravido family from Binghamton, New York. That's just one example, okay? Say you're in Bellows Falls, town near and dear to my heart. If you are picking up heating oil, you're going where? You're Tony and Diana James Oil. You are crossing that skinny little river and going to North Walpole, New Hampshire. The terminal that gets product from Levis, Quebec, but it is run by a company out of Maine. Once you cross back over to that skinny river and deliver that product to a house on Atkinson Street, you are an obligated party. They then flip back and go to North Walpole and drop that fuel off there. That product, of course, is not obligated because that's New Hampshire, right? These are small companies, not Valero, not Moravido, but small husband and wife companies that are becoming obligated. And that's what we want to avoid, right? Because the complexity in bringing fuel from all of these different spaces in and around Vermont, determining who's obligated and who's not, 200 different retail outlets in and around Vermont, not 200 different individually owned. I want to make sure that's clear. We don't have 200 individually owned companies coming, but we have different retail locations that are coming across Vermont. Some are obligated, some are not. It's going to get complex. There needs to be a significant amount of resources, if this is going to work, in order to ensure that every gallon is counted, every gallon is tracked, and more importantly, from my perspective, that compliance is enforced.
It needs to be a level playing field, and it sounds as though even under the current system, as I understand it, it's not entirely level, and that there are out-of-state suppliers making sales from all, but not charging the taxes, the fuel taxes.
The more complexity that you bring into the system, the easier it will be for non-compliance. And what is my nightmare, what keeps me up at night, is companies that aren't in compliance obtaining market share over companies that are in compliance. I don't know if it's going to be 2 cents or $2. I don't know. We don't know. We'll find that out along the way. That's the journey we're going to take if this becomes law. But the larger that number is, the challenge is how do you ensure that that a New Hampshire company, year after year, or a New York company, or Massachusetts, or a Vermont company that sells across both sides, to ensure that you track those gallons and ensure the gallons sold in Vermont. In many ways, I'm going to say something that's probably pretty obvious, but it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen in the order, the expediency which many people in this room would like, which is this policy would be a lot more effective if it were a regional policy. Every state is playing ball. That's what we did with sulfur. That's what we did with sulfur. Sulfur, we said, listen, our product can be cleaner, less particulate matter in the air, more efficient equipment, less maintenance for building up the scale if we took the sulfur out of heating oil. Vermont used to allow 2,000 parts per million sulfur content, but it was through the work of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association and Renewable Energy Vermont that partnered to pass a law signed by Governor Shumlin that required this product to be 15 parts per million, ultra low sulfur. With the understanding that we need to go along with the other states, and the other states did something very similar. So we have Massachusetts that is now considering a clean heat standard. We have New York that is working in this direction. The work done by Energy Action Network, Regulatory Systems Project, Vermont Climate Council, it has had an effect across borders, there's no question. Developing a policy that will actually help Vermont companies with this energy transition is really important. But this is not that because of the compliance complexities. And quite frankly, because if we are actually going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the product that more than half of Vermonters depend on for heat and hot water, we have to provide some flexibility to ensure that that liquid product can continue to be used. And the bill that was passed last year is more favorable to the one that is proposed this year.
Thank you, Chairman Bray. Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm wondering if you could describe what in absence of any bill like this, of the status quo, what your fuel dealers are thinking. As we heard from previous testimony, we're going to get off our dependence on fossil fuel either by design or by disaster. I'm wondering if the folks that you work with, or if generally in the industry, that's a conversation that's happening, and if we can rely on the free market to just resolve these issues.
So this is, and I'll share this with the group, this is from the Energy Information Administration. The heating oil industry has been in rapid decline from a volume and marketplace standpoint for the last 50 years. So a pretty good job reducing our market share, reducing our overall gallons. In the 1960s, 90% of Vermont homes relied on oil. Now we're about 40%, 42%. Our gallons have been halved, and we think our gallons will likely be halved again in the next 10 years. There'll be fewer companies delivering these products, but they will still be there. We know that because what's packed into this, never have we created yet energy source so dense with energy. 7 pounds to a gallon, 138,000 BTUs per gallon. It's why it is the creator of electron of last resort. It is why on December 24th, we kept the lights on in New England because of distillate. This is the product that we use when there's not enough natural gas, there's not enough sun to create electricity. There's 3 peaking plants. We will always need distillate in Vermont throughout New England. Now, can that be a lower carbon distillate? Yeah, it can be. We're going to need liquid fuels for the next 50 years.
So what, do you have a follow-up?
No, I just appreciate your testimony. And do we have this, is this in our packet?
No, I won't give it to you.
Thank you.
Along with this, which shows why New England is so dependent on this product for power generation. That's from Energy and Environment. I'll share that PDF with you as well.
Thank you.
Senator Watson.
I would just point out, as a matter of physics, uranium might trump.
No, you're right.
Yeah, thorium
Can we-
also
can we
might
sell
trump
uranium for
that. Anyway, just as a point of physics, but anyway, couple questions for you. So you are thinking about compliance questions. There's money built into this bill for managing the system. Are you suggesting that we need more positions or money to go into compliance?
What I'm suggesting is the 1.2 million that you'd allocate for FTEs for the PUC and DPS in order to create prop up such a program would be better spent getting oil and gas technicians to have to get their last license so they can utilize the $14,000 coming from the Inflation Reduction Act so they can install the equipment that you want them to install.
So no compliance then? Like just
No.
don't do the bill and no compliance?
No, I didn't say no.
Okay, okay.
That
Sorry.
would be bad. So what keeps me up at night is not Sherry Green, not having a company anymore. I like Sherry, but things change. People retire, people sell their companies, people consolidate. It happens all the time. What keeps me up at night is that this commodity is important to keep homes from freezing. And when we install electric heat pumps, we say, this is not a primary heating system. You got a mini split that's going to provide you air, but in your home, without weatherization, keep oil in the tank, keep propane in the tank. Oftentimes they make them sign something, so they're not held liable. They get the calls, we need fuel at 2 in the morning, mini split won't keep up. Now that could change. Technology changes, you can add more splits, but remember, more than 60% of the homes in Vermont are hydronically heated, right? So how are we creating heat? Through combustion, right? 5%, 6% is electricity. Whether you're burning wood, oil, or gas, you are combusting something. So not having a wood backup and relying solely on electricity is problematic. Not having a generator and relying solely on electricity is problematic. We are seeing more people have 2 fuel systems. And to some people in Connecticut or Jersey, like 2 different heating systems. We've been doing that for 200 years. We've always had backups. We're a resilient bunch. What we're not seeing is whole home conversions. We're not seeing switching. New construction, absolutely. High value insulation, yeah, we're seeing apartment buildings. I'm the city council in South Burlington. I used to be developer review board. We see lots of projects come forward that are electric only. That's fine, because they're built to a higher standard, not their existing housing infrastructure. Existing housing infrastructure needs to be weatherized or have 2 systems, and we're installing 2 systems.
Great, and one further question. One of the things that you mentioned that you mentioned a lot of organizations at the beginning.
Sure.
And so I kind of lost track of like who was doing what, but one of the things you mentioned was providing training, certification, and licensing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, or could you picture doing training around the S license, around heat pump installation, around weatherization, around any of these other sort of kind of like workforce training issues?
That's my job.
Okay, so you do.
That is my job.
So you do that now already. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
For 17 years.
Cool. Super. Thank you.
That is the heating and cooling contractors, so Vermont Fuel Dealers Association has member companies, and their employees all need to have a wallet card by the state of Vermont that says they're qualified to install gas or oil, or install electrical devices, or install plumbing devices. So that's the Vermont Building and Fire Code. So we teach them the code.
So one of the things that we just heard from our last guest was that there is this shortage of the S electrical, S license. Particularly like problems with people like passing that test. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what is that? Are you finding similar, like people having a hard time passing it? What's the training like? Things like that.
Senator Watson, I really appreciate this question because I have tried many times to shed light on this. It's a problem. It's a problem not just with electricians, it's a problem with plumbers. Our licensed plumber and electricians are graying out faster than we can train in the workforce. Remember, it's a 1-to-1 ratio under the DOL's apprenticeship program, right? So my father, who's a plumber, has to train as a master plumber, he can train one person, one individual. But you train that one individual and they may, as is their right, go to somewhere else, open up their own shop, they've got their license, they're moving on. Really, in order to cover your bases, you need to be training 3 to every one, 5 to every one if you could. You could find enough people that would want to do it. Same thing with electricians. Now with electricians, the S license test is incredibly challenging. And what you need an S license for is connecting the box. Whether you're a boiler, a burner that connects to a boiler or furnace, hot air, hot water, hot water harvest, or a cold climate heat pump, or an EV charger, because you have to upgrade to 200 amp service, you need a specialty license for electricians. And we're not creating enough of that in order. That's why I suggested better spent rather than this policy is to take that money and cross-train oil and gas tax. Now, that might be very selfish of me to say that, and I admit that, but that's where the need is.
If I-
We might think it's a false choice.
Well, so, one thought about that, so I appreciate tests that are hard, speaking as a teacher, but, I want to assume that the test is appropriately hard. I mean, what we were just talking about, this is really, Senator McCormick's question, but, is it that the test is too hard? Is it that the training needs to be better somehow? Is it that it's not like misaligned? Is it that the training needs to be longer? Like what, because we also heard that the license for natural gas has a much higher success rate. So how are these two things so different?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it. I mean, I'm not just being.
No, it's great. No, I'm into it.
So we train natural gas techs, we train propane techs, we train oil techs. We don't train wood techs because there's no requirement, right? We would though, if there was a requirement. We do S license electrician continuing ed, and we do S license plumbing continuing ed. In order to get your gas license, right, you've got to pass the American Gas Association's standard curriculum. That's what Vermont has adopted. Same thing with propane. The National Propane Gas Association has a standard curriculum which Vermont has adopted. On oil heat, it's the National National Oil Heat Research Association standard curriculum which Vermont has adopted. That's great because now the license travels to other states. And some states have their own particular flavor, and that makes it a little bit more challenging to go from here to there, but I like the way we have it set up.
And how do you learn that? I mean, do you learn to pass that? It's the education you need to pass that test on the job, or you go to like a tech center?
So you call the where the heating cooling contractors are from, and that's what we do. So you get in one of our certification classes. You can take a 2-week class to get your apprenticeship in oil heat, right? Then you work for 3 years, and then after that time, then you test. And after you test, then you're free to go on your own, buy your own van, and you're in the business of fixing oil burners. Or you continue to work for your employer that, in many cases, subsidized the tests and supported you on the journey. In propane, similar but different in gas, is that you start with the intensive 7-week course that we provide. And then you go work for an employer who then has to sign off on a skills assessment. So it's an apprenticeship program within the existing company. So you have to work for someone in order to get your license. And then after you pass your skills assessment, then you call up Debbie with the Department of Fire Safety, you send her $60 and fill out the application, and Bob, your uncle, here comes your wallet card, and you're in business. And then every 3 years, you have to renew that wallet card for $60 and the application to Debbie over the Department of Fire Safety in Springfield, and take a certification course that we also offer, 8 hours continuing education, 2 hours training in carbon monoxide, and training in energy efficiency as mandated by the legislature. And then you can continue to perform. With now to get to Senator Watson's point, with electricity, we used to be able to, and with plumbing, we used to be able to say, well, you've been doing this for a while, here's a 2-day prep course. If you pass the prep course and the practice test, then you can sit before the plumbing licensing board, plumbing, or the electrical licensing board if it's electricity. That was taken away. And now you have to go through the Department of Labor's apprenticeship program. We still provide training for existing plumbers and electricians to maintain their license, because that's simply an 8-hour continuing education course. But the initial licensing, which we have some ability to promote, influence, encourage, inspire for oil and gas, we don't have that same ability. So the entity that is providing the most amount of education for heating contractors in the state of Vermont 1,000 students walk through our doors every year. We can't do the initial training for electricians and plumbers. We used to. Love to get it back. Don't have it right now. We can only do this recertification.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So the organization can't do the initial training if that's only done by the Department of Labor?
So-
Or, sorry,
So the Department of Labor has a very extensive and very well-regarded apprenticeship program. We're absolutely creating, I don't want to misspeak here, we are creating very good electricians in the state of Vermont and very good plumbers. We're not creating more of them though. Or we're not creating the number that we need.
yeah, that's
If you had to call a plumber or an electrician, you might agree with that statement. So it's like anything in life, do we want to put do we want the bar set here and have so many people jump over it? Or do we want to set the bar here and have easier access so more people are able to obtain the license needed to entertain or to get to the energy transition that is certainly being mandated by this body?
it's actually super fascinating. Thank you.
So beyond the training, there are some things that I'd like to point out. I'll just go real quick. So I don't know if I'll use my time.
We're still good. We could.
Okay. Because these things I think are important parts of the bill for many people, but they're problematic from our perspective. The first is enforcement. You've got the wrong regulator. Why does the PUC, how are they able to convince Vermont Gas and all the different power companies to come in and make sure that they're doing things by the book? It's easy. How do you do that? Rates. They set the rates. If you want a return on your investment, 10.5% return on your investment, you walk through that door with your team of attorneys and you show you're doing exactly as they require. This PUC has no authority over the disparate bunch of fuel sellers throughout Vermont and New Hampshire, Massachusetts.
Does who is, to what degree currently is there authority over them?
Yeah,
Under whom?
I wrote that down because people often call us unregulated fuels and I have a good chuckle over that.
Yeah, they're regulated, it's just not for a price.
So the Agency of Agriculture, bear with me, Agency of Agriculture, Department of Weights and Measures. They bring out their provers every year. What's a prover? Put a gallon in, gallon out, regulated, make sure we're selling a gallon's worth of gasoline, heating oil, propane. Agency of Human Services, Office of Economic Opportunity, Department of Children's Families. They're our regulator when it comes to fuel systems. We have to comply by their rules. The Agency of Natural Resources, of course. The Department of Environmental Conservation, so when it comes to tax. Department of Tax, of course, we pay taxes on every gallon we sell. Different taxes depending on who we sell it to and what we sell. The Office of Attorney General. Sale of propane is regulated by the Office of Attorney General. CP 111, passed in 1986. The Public Service Department, they're also a regulator of propane when it comes to jurisdictional propane accounts, which are tanks that have more than 10 customers. Well, that's a brief explanation. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but just TPS. And of course, the big one, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles Commercial Enforcement Division. The men and women with trucks and lights and guns and badges that pull over trucks and check whether or not you are safe to sell this stuff on Vermont's highways and byways. The PUC, quite frankly, doesn't know who we are, what we sell, where it comes from, how much we sell, how it goes. How do we know this? Well, they testified last year, told us that. Now, maybe they've learned a lot in the last 6 months. Maybe not. The complexity with the clean heat standard makes me nervous. Makes me nervous that companies that are, in fact, playing by the rules will be at some sort of competitive disadvantages to those that don't, that there won't be any proper compliance or oversight. And by the time it's all figured out, it will be too late and homes will freeze or people will lose their livelihoods.
Well, so two thoughts come to mind. One is that the program becomes active in 2026. So I really appreciate your testimony at the beginning of 2023. I would hope that we could lean into this and figure it out. And not just for compliance under possible Affordable Heat Act, but compliance under current law that creates an unlevel playing field for some operators.
So if I could just briefly, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
understand that the products that come on a truck to your house have multiple purposes, right? So this is actually UCO, but I use it because the case is starting to mark. Use cooking oil. But it's distillate, right? So used for many purposes. Power generation, right? Heating oil, hot water. It's used for farm tractors, feller bunchers, skidders. It's used for trains, locomotives, used for ferries, right? So one of the things that is a policy decision that the PUC is going to, as I've sat through these regulatory proceedings, is going to ask, what do you think they meant by that? What is it that you want regulated? If I bring a gallon from North Walpole, New Hampshire, over to Vermont, is it just the stuff that's creating hot air, hot water? Or is it stuff that I sell to a generator? That's a genuine policy question that I think this legislature needs to answer before the PUC gets the verbiage and tries to discern what they actually meant by what we on the page. I'm not telling you to go one way or the other. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen. There's double counting here. I know I'm going to hear there's no double counting, but there's double counting here. And a wise man once told me, you can't sell the same horse twice.
Every Vermont farmer's goal. That's how you distinguish yourself
Clean,
from the next person.
clean heat credits should not be able to be sold by electric utilities who are using the same product or service to meet their obligations under the Renewable Energy Standard Tier 3 program. You can't count the same horse twice. This bill explicitly allows it, explicitly.
Well, are we counting different sorts of forces? There's REX and.
Yes, that is the response I expect here from my friend Jared and others. But,
Sorry, you said it so fast, I didn't really hear you. Can you say it again?
sure. The double counting. So if you are an electric utility, as I understand the bill, and if I'm incorrect, I would love it to be said on the record. You are, in fact, under the Tier 3 standard, the law that was passed in 2015, you can sell, or you can, in order to meet your compliance goals under the Renewable Energy Standard, Tier 3.
Okay, tier 3 versus. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Right. So if I sell a heat pump to my customer, I get credit under Tier 3 from an electric utility. And then take that sale and throw it into the credit market, and I can sell it twice. I'd love to be wrong here. Tell me I'm wrong. Someone's gonna write it on the record and say, that can't happen. Because right now, as I read it, that is allowed.
So we'll spend time vetting this very carefully, but you're satisfying requirements in two different programs. So it's not a sale of the same rec, or one is a rec, one is a clean heat credit. They're both, so that, if you said, well, you're getting credit in some way for the same thing. I would say, my short initial answer is that there's two different programs incentivizing activity, and you can have credits in each program by taking the same action.
This is my formal request for you to not allow that.
Thank you.
Second is, GREET is good. GREET, it's not greed. No, not greed. This isn't a movie from the 1980s. What's that?
The tag.
Yeah, greenhouse gases, regulated emissions, and energy use of transportation. The model that is specifically cited in this legislation and was in the prior version as a way that we can do a life cycle analysis from whatever the energy source is, whether it's wherever the electricity comes from, wherever the oil comes from, where the biofuel comes from, where the wood comes from, where we can analyze the life cycle emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. This is the U.S. Department of Energy, Argonne National Laboratory standard. This is the real deal here. But your legislation, as proposed, on page 17 says, agreed. Or an alternative of comparable analytical rigor to fit the Vermont thermal sector context. I have no idea what that means, but I'm scared as heck by it. If we're propping up a program, which we should, inspire others, maybe do a joint thing, with other surrounding states. We create a Vermont flavor of GREET based on a handful of meetings, PUC. That's not.
Is California only use the green model?
That's what they use. And Floyd could probably testimony on that. This is a request that I made last year in front of Representative Bicklett's committee, and I made last year in front of this committee, and I'm going to do it one more time. Fix the DDA, designated default agent. The DDA, right? So just a reset, remember watching. This is where a fuel seller that doesn't have enough credits is putting it into, is buying it from the exchange, and it's going to the DDA, and the DDA is doing all this work, and the DDA has to do work for low and moderate income. Okay, we got it. Who does this work, or where would it best benefit and that comply with the other stipulations that you put in there? Weatherizing low-income homes, right? Can we all agree? That's probably the best use of funds. If we could all of a sudden weatherize the third of our housing stock that is lower moderate income, that needs weatherization, that would be the best use of that fund. Am I saying anything controversial here? Please stop me.
Well,
Then we have an agency within state government that does that, and we have nonprofit work done by Capstone and Brock and SEPCA and NITO and CDOEO that do this work. Why wouldn't they be the DDA? Why would we let a for-profit company, let's just take out a straw man, Mr. Chips at Big Wood, say he becomes the DDA because he beds $1 and says, I'll do that job for $1. And all of a sudden, every single home is getting wood-fired stove and they're meeting the compliance goal. That's not what we want, right? So why don't we make it certain? DDA should be an agency of government or a nonprofit working through OEO in order to deliver efficiency services to low-income homes.
interesting idea. Senator White.
Thank you, Chairman Bray. That's an interesting point. They can, just so I understand the bill, they can be a DDA, but we've allowed flexibility for others to exist. Are you suggesting that you think it's more likely that the DDAs with flexibility will become for-profit companies that will I think, so that's.
So can I answer that?
Yes, but I have one follow-up, which is I'm concerned that you are potentially setting up some of our, like I'm thinking Vermont Gas could be a DDA, for example, if I'm
No,
understanding.
they can't because they're, so
Is it, but within their, could they,
can I just, because you're on the right path there. I suggested that last year, and one of the amendments to it was to remove an obligated party. So Vermont Gas is by nature an obligated party, so they cannot be a DDA. But that the first draft, Jared will correct me if I'm wrong later, but the first draft said that, we removed that and said, no, you can't be a market participant. What I'm suggesting is the DDAs, the value of the DDA is delivering services to that very difficult for us to quantify, and I'll get to that next if you have time for me, sector that you're trying to focus on, which is low, moderate income Vermonters. And if we agree that the best case scenario for low and moderate income Vermonters to receive the benefit of this credit system is to have their homes, number one, weatherized, I think we're all in agreement. The entities that deliver that are those that currently exist and have been delivering these services since the 1980 weatherization program. I don't think that a market participant, listen, I can't predict the future, which is, do I think it will happen? I don't know, but why allow it? Why allow the possibility that a market participant could game the system and sell widgets to get credit for selling widgets to low and moderate income when what they really need is safer homes that use less energy?
I think, so I don't want to debate, so it'll take us too long. I think the concern is that weatherization alone has too little impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the North Star for the bill is greenhouse gas emissions. The challenge we're addressing is the most affordable path to to that level of performance. So weatherization, although something we've supported in this committee, we did the weatherization for all, the weatherization scale stuff. We budgeted over $100 million for that now. Totally agree, it's an important thing, but I think the reason we're also doing this is that we need to reduce emissions. So I'm mindful of the clock. We're having a good, robust conversation. We have 5 more minutes. I just wanted to make sure that we get to cover your points. And if we're out of time, then we'll schedule more time.
I appreciate that, and I really think you need, in my opinion, you should hear from a variety of people that are doing this work. Mark is great with my country, but there are a lot of Marks out there that deliver a different variety of products and services and have opinions. I cannot possibly represent actually all the different unit contractors and heating fuel sellers. I'm just their voice inside the State House and I guide them towards the issues.
So again, just to be sure, I want to work with you offline to get witness recommendations.
I know Senator McCormick and I have both received multiple emails from our constituents.
Right.
So great.
So just to reset here, and then I appreciate you for your time, which is we sell 196 million gallons of this product, distillate. One or two, biodiesel. It's all going the same diesel engines, or it's going into burners. Tanks that go into burners. Comes from a variety of different ways. Pathways, different size companies. But remember, less than half of that is for residential home heating, right? So we use distillate for trucks, cars. My car runs on diesel. We use it for power generation. We use it for farm equipment, locomotives. It's all the same product, right? Except that the rack, cetane goes into it, or lubricants, depending on what type of engine it's going into. It's really important that this committee recognize that what you are actually providing requirements for is a significant issue for those that have to maintain the records in order to sell this product to the state, which we are going to use for a very long time, in some form or the other. And the more complexity that you bring to this regulation, the less likely there is going to be compliance. And without compliance, then we have economic displacement, and at worst, don't have the workforce that will deliver the products that you want. This does not do that.
For each of those different end uses that you're talking about, someone's delivering and producing a ticket and billing them. So is there not the capacity? Maybe we don't currently, collect the data this way, but for each sale, don't we have a pretty clear idea how that fuel is being used? So you can deliver to a farm, we deliver to a place where it's a generating station, whatever it is, whether it's going into a tank next to somebody's house.
You don't have that. You simply do not have that. It does not exist. You sell a gallon from North Walpole, New Hampshire. It goes into a 2,800 gallon straight truck. It then goes into another tank, small tank or a big tank. It then eventually gets sold to the customer. That customer could be a farm. That customer could be a power generator, or standstill generator. Now, if the answer is all of it, well, that's a policy decision. But don't leave the PUC guessing.
Yeah. Thank you. Senator White?
Oh, if we don't have time, it's fine. I can ask.
Well, we have 2 more minutes on this visit. So,
Can I put a pin in the question then?
please.
Thank you, Chairman Bray. We've heard from the administration that they feel we should not move forward with the Affordable Heat Act because there's not enough fossil fuel data. We just don't have enough information about how fuels are being used and there's not enough analysis. I would love to at some point understand why we don't have that analysis currently from the side of our fuel dealers unable to provide this information? Is there a way for us to track data better or differently that would answer the administration's questions? And that's a big question, but
Exactly. It is an important question, but it is a simple answer.
Oh.
We send it into the state of Vermont on the 25th of the month.
okay. Sure. Good.
We pay taxes on the 25th of the month.
Okay.
Detailing gallons sold. Could there be more information that gets to what you're after, what the product is used for, the content of biodiesel or renewable propane in that fuel? Yeah. No. You don't have that now. You need to authorize legislation in order to figure out exactly how much individual companies are selling. We do not have that. This does not provide that.
So the tax reporting, we should look at the form that tax uses and then compare it to what the level, the granularity we would need in order to execute this, or implement this well,
Yes.
and see the differences.
Thank you.
All right, so we're at time. Would you like to come back? Do you have more things you want to? Always. All right. Thank you for that. We've never seen a challenge we didn't like, so.
Did you get through all your points that you had planned for us today?
No, but it could.
How many more points did you have?
If I could,
Yeah.
it's okay with the chair, I'd like to send you I just have notes here, I'd like to send you a more formal list of points referencing specific changes that I would make in your policy.
Okay, great.
That's okay.
Great, that will be helpful. And the other thing too is if you could provide information to us to help us understand the fuel supply chains that you laid out, because my notes are a little are somewhat incomplete, like trying to keep track of the different routes and the different types and where those locations are.
Right. And I can send you these maps. These are just slides that I thought about showing the map. I don't know where this conversation is going, but I'm happy to show that.
Okay, great. Right, thank you very much.
And by the way, these maps do not come from any government agency. They are a creation of my database.
Okay, in other words, the government doesn't have that data, so we're gonna have to learn.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna have to learn.
Oh, maybe I'll share with Jared. Thank you.
I've got the confidentiality agreement first. Okay. You wish help. Thank you so much for waiting, and good to see you again. It's been a while since we've all been together.
Yes.
A lot of Zooming. So, as you know, we're working on the Affordable Heat Act. I wanted to touch base because we're talking about a program that will have over time a profound impact on housing in Vermont and costs in Vermont. And the Affordable Heat Act fits in, I think, with making housing more affordable by making the carrying costs of that housing more affordable. So that's our general sort of area of interest. We're happy to hear what testimony you would like to share with us. And then maybe if there's time allows, we could touch base on wrap.
Oh.
Just wrap up.
Very nice. Well teed up. I'm Maura Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I am not an energy expert, and I have been following this committee's testimony this week, and so we're going to shift gears. You now have a housing person talking to you, so let's keep the questions all based on housing, please. No, but to move from being cutesy to serious, while I may be a housing person, it is obvious the realities of climate change. And we know the targets in the Global Warming Solutions Act and the need for the state to meet those. And I do see, I've been following the evolution of last year's bill and this bill, and I do see the Affordable Heating Act as the best way to achieve the goals the legislature has for the state. I think there's some great opportunities here. You mentioned RAP, which is the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Pilot Program, pick whatever word you want at the end there. RAP just fully launched last month. We had a press conference, Senator, you were there, Mr. Chair. And so we're working, it took time to work through all the details of really creating the first ever statewide tariff on bill repayment program. And so I'm really excited, and I can see the ways that if S5 passes, how it could really complement and support the RAP program. And I see some nice symbiotic connections there largely. And now for the but. We need to be honest that the transition from our current system to this very needed change is going to cost money. And there's a real risk that without firm targets and guardrails, that this transition could continue the economic and environmental burden that lower income Vermonters already face. So I know our state has a goal of ensuring equitable access to the benefits of energy efficiency, renewables, energy incentives, but we do need to be honest that sometimes we fall short in the implementation of that goal and that reaching the intended targets. So I am coming to this as an advocate for low and moderate income Vermonters. VHFA's mission, if you don't have it memorized, I do, so I will tell you. It's to finance and promote the safe, decent, affordable housing for low and moderate income Vermonters. And so that's my mission. I watched the testimony online that Rich Cowart did yesterday, and he had that great graphic with 4 policy trade-offs, kind of like he hand drew the corners there. And it was faster greenhouse gas reductions, allow only the cleanest heat options, lower Vermont's total heat bill, and more support for low-income households. Well, I'm a mother of 3. I have little baby blankets at home. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm just here to like pull on the corner of more support for low-income households. That's my job here today, is that I want to make sure that they are fully covered. And this is really hard to do. I know we all want to do it, but it is hard to do because equitable access requires that we make things, we have to be honest, it means it has to be cheaper and easier for lower income Vermonters, because there are real economic barriers that have prevented their access to a lot of programs. So in reality, that might mean serving fewer people and costing the system more at the same time. That's not a great dynamic, but we just have to be honest about this. And yet, I really appreciate how the Affordable Heating Act provides meaningful contributions to the climate solution goals, and I do see this as the best way forward. With a few tweaks, I think there are ways to ensure low-income households can be well served by the AHA. So I really like the income-based mandates. I think they're a really meaningful step to equity. I've talked with Jared, I heard his testimony yesterday. I understand that more than half of all fossil fuels go into residential use, and so the AHA will effectively mean 65% of all residential heat services will go to low and moderate income households. Sometimes I call them LMI households. I hope that's okay. So I'm asking the committee to consider if instead of that percentage being the same every year, if you could talk with the smart people and see if it's possible to front load the benefits to lower income households by increasing those percentages for the first, I'm going to say 5 years, but you can pick a number, and then level out to the percentage goal that meets their needs. And I say that because without front loading LMI households, we run the risk of increasing the heating cost on these vulnerable Vermonters without ensuring that they have access to the installed measures that are going to help get them off the roller coaster of price volatility, and they have less means to wait for their turn for assistance. So I'm trying to get them to the front of the line. I get that they're in there now and they're going to be served, it's the weighting aspect that has a bigger burden on them than others.
I'm gonna think about it's like a supermarket checkout. If we have one line now for them, you would like 3 lanes. Get more people through faster.
Exactly. And so can we can we put them to the front of the line and really meet their needs meaningfully, and then understand that higher income households, if prices were to rise on their delivered fuels or however this is gonna work, and the incentives weren't as robust on day one for them, that there's more ability for them to withstand that transition than our lower income Vermonters. So, and I don't know exactly where the 16% came from, or, but I know that there was basis behind it. Again, I don't eat and breathe this every day, but after primarily serving LMI households for the first few years, it could buy us some time to assess what that permanent ratio should be. Is 16 and 16 the perfect number, or is it 20 for low income Vermonters and 12 for moderate income Vermonters? Is it a more tiered system? And just, again, I know that the 16 and 16 was rooted in some analysis of consumption, and I don't want to say it, it's rooted in something Jared explained to me and I didn't pick up, but I just want to say I'm not positive that even moderate income Vermonters should get with lower income Vermonters, and if we shouldn't be looking at more of a slope to that.
Right. So if you had 20, then 12, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So that's my first suggestion. Have all the benefits go to LMI for the first few years because of the timing issue, and then taper to a more balanced approach for the duration. My next suggestion is a bit more of a, it's more of a question. I'm not sure where property owners, and I'm thinking of rental properties, fall into these LMI targets, since they may not income qualify themselves, but their residents very well may. And so this is another area where maybe if the first few years we could have a stronger focus on rental housing, which then levels out over time, that focus on rental housing may need to be focused or defined on the rents charged for the rental property as a proxy for income, as opposed to the income of the applicants or the property owner who might be higher income property owners. And I say rent charge, I truly don't think that someone is going to charge less in rent in a market economy just to get $500 off a heating pump, incentive or something. I don't think we're going to pervert the system by looking at rents charged as opposed to incomes. We have to be realistic though. You're not always going to know the incomes of the renters, and that would be quite a burden for property owners to provide to anyone, because government subsidized housing, yes, we check their incomes all the time because they're getting a benefit. We need to make sure if they qualify. That's different. That's only 14,000 of our rental properties, but there's 80,000 rentals total. And it's not common for landlords to ask for income information after someone initially moves in. So just when you start thinking, oh, we should ask about renters' incomes, know that that is not something that happens, and that is a really big administrative burden. And someone's then got to check it and administer that. And there we say a registry might help with this, but we don't have that. And so back to my point, that my next suggestion, the second suggestion, is to prioritize rental housing based on the rents charged for the first few years for the same reasons as before, that the cost of imported fossil fuels might rise in year one. And so the race will be on for lower income households to be served, and renters whose landlords choose not to participate will be held captive in this higher cost environment until their home is addressed. We know about the split incentive. We need to do something to overcome that with this program. I already kind of mentioned my third suggestion is to just really be a bit firmer about what the 16% are based on. I don't have a magic number. I don't have an analysis to say you will meet the needs and do everything right if it's at 20%, 12% or something else. But I would just really encourage the committee to think about having the overwhelming majority of benefits serving the lowest income Vermonters for several years right out the gate, when the market for these credits, I think, are likely going to be the strongest.
Senator Watson?
So just to, so two things. One is just to clarify the 16%, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of where that comes from, it's 16% of the total greenhouse gas emissions that is coming from low or moderate income housing. Is that? Well, so anyway, it's like a proportion of
Yep.
the greenhouse, like the total pie of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's
And I
one.
would believe that if
Yeah.
you had defined low and moderate income, but since we don't know
Okay,
who we're
fair
talking about, I don't know that we can really say that.
Okay, no, that's fair, and
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how I had
Yeah.
understood it, and I'm happy to be wrong about that, but, the other, so, okay, thinking about renting and how we address rentals, complicated, not obvious, how to do that. With the focus on low, like, right now, I appreciate the language that somebody used yesterday that was like, put like a smaller ring around just the low income folks, make sure that that they get work done, because it might be more difficult or something like that. So, but that's gonna, in the Venn diagram of housing, you know, there's gonna be a lot of overlap potentially between low income and renters. I'm trying to think of like, how do we structure that? Could it be like a either or in addition to, or do you have any suggestion about like specifically how to address renters, or is it just like, put it out there and we'll like, let us figure it out or something?
I don't have specifics about how to
Okay.
do renters. I have a few ideas, but I don't know that they're good ideas. So I'm nervous to say them in front of you all yet, but like, I mean, one is I can't fully picture this default delivery agent, but just a recent thought, actually I wanna give credit to someone else on my team at VHFA came up with, was like, well, could you prioritize their work with renters and have them, I'm gonna say, only work with renters. And so anything that goes to the default delivery agent serves renters, so that we know that that's being served. I'm not sure how that would play out and how much is gonna go to the default delivery agent as compared to the other three ways of dealing with these credits. And so I don't know that that would meet the needs, but it's something that I'd love to see explored. And I do wanna give credit that I have been talking with Jared, talking with many other folks, Rich Cowart and many, and like the door is open and they see this and are open to these conversations and have just been, I appreciate the welcomeness that when I say, wait a minute, because in a minute I'm gonna say, how you dealing with manufactured homes, which you often call mobile homes. I'm gonna raise that flag too. And they're like, okay, these are good questions. You're right. We need to look at this and address this. And so I just really appreciate that openness. And in a minute, I'm gonna put in a plug that like, you gotta have more housers as a part of this, because I'm gonna walk through different housing types and say how I think this is gonna play out. And some of them, it might be okay, and some of it, I don't know. And so renters is one. I can't solve the split incentive through this program with this. We started to address it in RAP. And so if that's in play, I can kind of see it, but not even in full.
So there is language in the bill about having this program play nicely with other programs and
Yes.
acknowledging them. So I think that's part of the mix, like RAP, if it does what we hope, will finally overcome that split incentive problem on renting. Do I think it will all happen? No, and how fast it goes, I don't, we'll figure that out by operating the program. But I have been imagining that program could grow over time to address that sector. There's IRA money coming, we're at a moment where this program, because of it's like an open an open standard in computing, like we're saying, this program's open to connect to every other program that we run. And sort of plug and play, so
Yeah.
making the plug and play work is the, I think, some of our challenge.
Yeah. So so I'm a big cheerleader for RAP, so I'm gonna say yes to all of that. We have a clear goal of expanding RAP beyond who it serves now. It's important to know that right now RAP does serve renters up to 4 units where there's 1 master meter for the building. So we aren't serving most renters with RAP right now. I wanna get there, I'm committed to, locking ourselves in a room until we can crack that nut and figure it out. We're not there yet. And I just wanna say, being open to playing well with others is incredible, but again, 3 kids at home, I'd like for them to play well with others. Sometimes I need to require them to take certain actions so that all goes well in the play yard. And I'm saying, I am saying that right now, maybe it is envisioning, yes, it'll work with the Weatherization Assistance Grant Program, it'll work with RAP, it'll work with LIHEAP, it'll work with everything coming down the pike from IRA. Maybe so, but unless you have guardrails and firm targets, you will not achieve that goal. I mean, I see it on the housing side, it's not just this. Like, we require, if you get BHFA money, you have to accept this common tenant application. So everyone who gets our money says, yeah, we'll accept a common tenant application. But what they do is they say, yep, I accept that. Now fill out this other 12-page application. They accepted it. They played well with the form we came up with, but they did not lower the burden on, in this case, the applicants. So.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting confused because
Senator McDonald.
the goal, all this discussion that we're having, the various witnesses are how to achieve our goals. Do we have a committee, an agreement on what our goals are and how we discipline ourselves to focus our testimony on those goals?
I'm probably repeating myself. So our North Star is greenhouse gas reductions. The goal, the work we're doing, I say, is we're trying to find the most affordable, equitable path to those reductions.
So when the affordability and equitable bumps up against reducing greenhouse gas emissions, how do we deal with that as a committee?
Good question. I mean, that's Mr. Coward's blanket yesterday with people tugging on the different corners.
When the blanket is rendered into 4 different shreds from each corner, how do we put the blanket back together again? This isn't. We have to have some principles upon which we say lines we're not going to cross as we try and reduce greenhouse gases and bring the costs of heating our citizens' homes down. What lines are we not going to cross? Because we could.
Well, I think everyone in the committee will have their own answer for that, and our witnesses as well. But I know it's maybe frustrating to hear. For me, I'm feeling like one of the things that I'm most proud of in the committee is when we are willing to spend time under stress and uncertain about stuff and acknowledge that there's some uncertainty. We're puzzling our way through stuff. So it would be great to have a metric that we just said, oh, that's it, that's out. But I think we're working towards figuring things out still. And it means weeks of testimony, weeks of learning, gaining different perspectives, and then I think we'll come back around to an answer before we're voting the bill out. So that's how I'm feeling about it. And that's the biggest change for me as the chair over time. When you're a teacher, you know how you like to have a lesson plan and everyone's on that plan. And then after a while, it's like, well, you realize a lot of good learning happens outside the lesson plan. So I'm feeling like we're willing to go outside the lesson plan and figure it out. And I'm confident we'll come back around. That's where I'm.
Eisenhower said the battle plan goes out the window with the first shot.
So I'm looking at the clock. We have 6 more minutes. So Senator Watson and Senator White.
Oh no, that was my comment because I'm anticipating that we may not get to hear all of the housing things. Anyway, just hoping that we can I mean, that's not my, but
Yes.
I'm just anticipating, that's all.
So I would ask two things, just because I don't want to step this abrupt, or the bell will ring in a moment, all that stuff, that you're painfully familiar with. So could we ask you, one, to ask you to provide more testimony, and could you submit written testimony as well? Because then we'll have the chance to really read it.
I already have this in a memo. I didn't submit it yet because I wasn't sure how this was gonna go, and if you wanted to have me back again and when I should submit, but yeah, I can do that.
But we do have a couple minutes, so can you give us at a high level, what else is on the checklist?
Quick thing, we haven't defined low and moderate income, and so it's hard for me to know what I'm speaking to, back to Senator Watson's point. So I'm just gonna say, I'm assuming that low income is, in my world, like below 80% of median, and moderate goes up to 120% of median. I know I'm not explaining what that means, but that's where my basis is for my next few comments.
And that's where that's the metric we've used for the last several years in this committee.
So there are certain economic realities that are likely for this population then. One, paying for large upfront costs associated with installed measures may prevent lower income households from being able to participate in the benefits that the AHA creates unless incentives almost cover the entire cost of that measure. So that's just a reality, economic reality. Relatedly, they may not have the ability to take on debt to cover these costs. Maybe they already have a high debt burden. They may not have enough ability to repay, maybe credit barriers. That's a reality. We shouldn't assume that people are going to go take out a loan for this. There's going to need to be assistance to help households navigate the new system, and that needs real attention. I think many of us can appreciate the humility we feel, or I feel, when there are too many options to address a need within our home. And so who's going to be that trusted advisor to work with residents who are weighing their options? Too often low-income Vermonters are taken advantage of. There's an information gap because an industry participant knows all the options and the homeowner is presented with one, or the resident is presented with one. And that's a problem because maybe they'd be better served with more information. So some kind of, I'm not sure how that works. These are just questions and realities that we have to build in.
Right.
Most lower income Vermonters are renters, and most of them pay their own utilities. And I don't think that right now this really addresses that landlords don't have an incentive to make the changes to the home, yet the renters are gonna have no choice but to pay these costs. So I think there's probably a way we can build that in. Again, prioritizing renters, creating those incentives. This is a great tool. I want to remain supportive. I just think that we need to look at some of these a little more. And the last one is that homes often need more than just installed clean heat measures or even weatherization. That good clean heat credits are often in homes that have substantial health and safety deficiencies. And there aren't sufficient resources to address homes' health and safety needs. That's not your issue to tackle. That's probably in other committees. But I just want to make sure you knew that the Office of Economic Opportunity, in their One Touch program where they go around doing weatherization work, they did a survey of, 1,300 homes that they're weatherizing. 71% had structural or safety risks. 52% had moisture problems. You know, we can think about putting solar on a roof or insulation, but if you have asbestos and vermiculite, if you don't have the support on your roof, or your roof needs to be repaired or replaced, then there are other issues. And this is where it gets back to, I understand it's going to work well with the other programs, the housing repair safety programs, but how will it proactively engage those groups? The last thing I was going to walk through was how I kind of think this is going to play out in single family homes and different multifamily and manufactured homes. I don't know if I should come back for that, or if you just want to read it in my written testimony and not have me back. But there are enough, the end of that story was going to be, there's enough easy projects to keep the obligated parties busy for quite some time. And so S5 could prioritize some of those difficult ones, focusing on the things we don't have answers for, which would add in incentives or requirements, carrot or stick, you choose, to push the market to serve those households, which includes manufactured home owners and renters of other housing. So lastly, really self-interested questions for you to consider. I think I'm gonna say the Equity Advisory Group would be really well served by having a housing professional named as a part of the group. The focus is so largely on residential that a representative focus on low and moderate income households with an understanding of the housing market is critical. Not surprising to anyone, I'm gonna suggest that BHFA could be that representative, but you may have other ideas and that's fine. But thinking through the implementation details is critical.
Sure.
And RAP is a tool, but yet an unproven one. So please don't think it's going to solve all these issues. And lastly, if I had to pick one last thought to share, especially if I had time to go through the housing types and talk about multifamily housing, there's a lot of issues there that I think you'd really need to hear more about. And so I encourage you to have Kathy Beyer or someone from Evernorth or some developers and owners of multifamily housing to talk about the structural issues that come up in existing multifamily buildings where electrifying can be physically challenging due to the design of the building. There's often no place to put condensers in downtown developments. There's no roof space because of the solar panels. There's no outdoor space. And you got to relocate tenants sometimes and the like. It's harder than sometimes it seems. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, we knew you'd have some challenges for us.
Thoughts.
A couple of thoughts and some challenges. So thank you so much for your written testimony. We can follow the conversation and see if you want to come back again. We're adjourned because we are on the floor in 1 minute.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
did you have a chance, so you brought up the front loading piece, and I feel like you addressed that already, but Bill, on page 10, underneath, subsection B, section 4.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if you can respond to if that's not. I should get some.
Okay, I'm just not sure how it's.
So it says particularly, the commission should consider that big rate portion in the early years.
Mhm.
So I feel like that directly responds, so if that doesn't feel like it answers it, we should correct it. Well, tell me what that looks like, because that feels strong.
Yeah, it's fair. It's very fair.
And then the other piece that I am confused about, that I wanted to ask a question about, is exactly what you said, what are the income guidelines for that? Because my understanding is that the commission will actually make those definitions. So I'd love to know what you think.
We should talk more about that.
Yeah,
That'd be good.
Because if they're really high, then it dilutes it.
And my understanding is the federal poverty stuff means nothing now.
Well, it's just multiple times of it. We start talking about 3 or 4.
Well, I'm considered, like, we make 50,000.
Right.
And we're somehow doing great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Fine.
If you could send me anything you have, and then I can give it to
Yep.
the committee.
Yep.
Thank you. It was great to see you
Yeah.
last night, Nancy.
Yeah, same. I'm looking forward to working with you.
And thanks for taking the time. Last night I was exhausted, so I apologize that I wasn't as robustly participating in.
And
No, it's not boring.
Oh my God,
It's
at 4:30 in the afternoon?